Good afternoon, everybody. I'm your host, Andrew Burnett, and welcome to Faith Chats, where we talk about faith, family, freedom, and America. Today, my guest is Barry Abernathy of Appalachian Roadshow. Barry, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, Andrew. How are you doing today?
I'm great. So, share with us a little bit about your background as a bluegrass player.
Well, I had a bluegrass gospel group when I was about 19, a group called Silver Creek. Myself and a gentleman named Barry Scott, another gentleman named James Jones. All three of us ended up playing for Doyle Lawson and Quicksilver later on in our life. Doyle's a bluegrass Hall of Famer, and in my opinion, one of the, if not the greatest bluegrass artist of all time. Of course, everybody has their own. There's a lot of good ones, but Doyle's that's where I got my start listening to his music and got me to wanting to play the banjo. And anyway, after 2 or 3 years of just a local regional bluegrass gospel group, Doyle heard me play somewhere and ended up calling me for an interview for a tryout. And I went and tried out, and he had somebody else that had a tryout, and all about the same time, I ended up getting a tryout with a group called Third Time Out, was Doyle's old band. They had just started, so I went to work with them. Worked almost a year with those guys, and then the guy Doyle hired ended up leaving, and he called, and I went to work with him. Worked about 6 years there, and then myself and Steve Gully, who was the lead singer in that band at the time, we left and started a group called Mountain Heart, and I had that group for almost 17 years, and then in 2018 I started putting together I did a solo project, released a solo project, and or did one, didn't release it, but anyway, put together a band called Appalachian Roadshow with Jim Van Cleve, Darrell Webb, Zeb Snyder, and Todd Phillips. So uh, been doing that ever since.
So let's backtrack for a minute. Where did the banjo playing really come in for you? Was it a childhood moment? Did you grow up to the sounds of bluegrass
It
music, or
was
where did?
it was literally a moment. It was a moment. I grew up in church. I loved singing. I loved to get up and lead songs when I was 10 or 11 years old. I liked to sing when I remember when I was 3. My mom got me a little guitar and I couldn't chord it. I don't have fingers on my left hand, so I play without fingers on my left hand. But anyway, something just popped up on my screen there, buddy. I'm sorry. Get that off the screen so I can see you. Anyway, so yeah, I played a little, strummed the guitar and sang Buck Owens songs when I was about 3 years old. I don't know how, but my mom and dad had one of his records, and we had other stuff, and I loved music from the beginning. But when I was in my formative years, I played in or sang in church, and I liked the banjo and I liked the mandolin. I love stuff like that, but I didn't see any way to play. And one day, before Christmas, when I was about 14, I think I was 14 years old, going on 15. Um, my mom went Christmas shopping over in Dalton, Georgia, which is about an hour away from where we live. And back then they had record stores. There's a Turtles record store. I don't know where you live at, but we had Turtles record stores all in the big cities. And I was just browsing around while she was shopping and fingering, thumbing through some stuff, and I seen a album, Doyle Lawson and Quicksilver, "Rock My Soul." And when I saw it, I turned it over, and they had their instruments on the back, and I saw a guy holding the banjo, and I thought, I'd like to hear that. The song sounded good. It was all gospel record. So I asked my mom, I said, Mom, can I have this? And she said, it'll be one of your Christmas presents. I said, that's all right. So she got it, and we headed back home, and she stopped at her sister's house, my aunt, and they started wrapping presents and stuff. And when they did, I got a hold of this and opened it up. And my cousin had a turntable, and I stuck it on the turntable. And I don't know how many of your listeners know, but like the most famous song Doyle ever done was a song called "On the Sea of Life." And that was his closer for his whole career, pretty much. And anyway, that was the first song of that album. And so I heard it, and it was a banjo kickoff, and I was like blown away. It blew me away, and it was simple. And I got studying the banjo from that. I was like, this is what I want to do. I knew right then that's what I wanted to do. So I got studying, and the banjo's an all open chord. It's an open instrument. It's tuned open. So with my hand like it is, I chord with this and some with this, and occasionally I can get like a bar chord or something, with three. But it's, if you can see that. Anyway, the point being. I realized that I could pick out a melody with it, because you don't strum, you're playing with these three fingers with picks on, so it's one string at a time. And if I could have an open string, I could always get to the next note. So that's kind of what started it. And that would have been, like I say, I was 14, going on 15 when that happened. I'm 56 now, so it set me on fire, and I've played pretty much every day since.
So in 1993, you entered the professional bluegrass scene. What was your first big break, and how did joining Doyle Lawson and Quicksilver shape your skills as a banjo player?
Well, 93, my first professional job was, like I said, a group called Third Time Out. And I was there just a little while. And I had tried out with Dole before, like I'd said earlier. And the other guy got the job there. But it just, I think it seemed like a fit for him and me both. I was a young man. I think I was like 23 or so at the time, 24 maybe. And anyway, yeah, the third time out was it's an experience. Those guys were trying to get something going. They had just left Dole and were getting something going, and I needed to learn from somebody. I needed to learn from somebody that knew the ropes and was experienced. And Dole was good at teaching, and the bass player in the band, Dale Perry, was a good banjo player. Still is a great banjo player. And so those guys helped me, because everything I did, I played just the way I heard it. I didn't really take lessons or learn from anything in particular. So I learned a lot of banjo there, and I learned a ton about harmony singing, how to be a road musician. I learned that I loved it. I learned what I would and wouldn't do if I had my own band. All these things. But yeah, it was very, very formative experience, and I still Doyle is a hero of mine, my biggest musical hero, and probably always will be. I think he's 81 now, and so he was about actually he was younger than I am when I started playing with him. So but he's still, I heard him sing at Blue Highway Fest a couple of days ago. I heard somebody do a recording of him singing that very song, "On the Sea of Life," with another group, and he sounded just like he did when he was 30 years old. Incredible still.
So you played with groups like Third Time Out and Mountain Heart. What were the biggest lessons you learned from those experiences, and which performance stands out to you as a career highlight?
Well, third time out was quick. Yeah, I cut a record with them right after I started. But the Mountain Heart was my band. I left Doyle and Steve Gully and myself. We started that band together. Jim Van Cleve was 18 years old, and he's my partner in this band, Appalachian Roadshow, and he was the fiddle player. He came on with Doyle, and we'd just been there a few months, and he wanted to go play with us. So I told him, I said, "You tell Doyle, and you be the one to tell him, and if you quit, Doyle, I'll take you." I said, "But I'm not gonna just pull you away, without you saying something." Of course, he didn't say anything to Doyle forever till the wind got blowing, and Doyle found out that he wanted to leave. So anyway, we all left. But yeah, Mountain Heart was my band. I was pretty much the sole owner of that the last several years that I was there. And yeah, I mean, it was a super duper experience. I mean, 17 years is a long time. That's a lot of longevity for a band. And I had some younger guys at the time in the band with me, and they had a little different musical direction. And of course, I booked the band, and I had my clientele that I knew, would use us. I knew how to get work. And when we got all the younger guys in, they had musical directions they wanted to try out and go. And of course, I let my business be a vehicle for some of that. And I learned that you need to brand yourself and be what you are, and hire people in, or hopefully hire people in that see the vision the same way you do. And it's not always the case. But we had the same band for several years there, and that band, the core band, would have been myself, Steve Gully, Jim Van Cleve, Jason Moore on upright bass, Adam Steffi, who's one of the greatest mandolin players that's ever lived, and Clay Jones on guitar. So we had a six-piece band. Scott Bolin run sound for us. Gene McIntosh was our bus driver, so there was like 8 of us on the road all the time, and it was that core band did really well, very successful. And when Steve moved on around 2007, things changed. It changed, and I had to try to learn the business from a different angle, and how to market yourself, to a different audience, and it didn't fit real good. So anyway, that's kind of what where Appalachian Roadshow spurned from that. I kind of learned a few lessons. I thought, I've done this successful before, and I don't want. I've still got more left to give. I've got more creativity in me. I want to do it. So Jim and myself got back together and talked after a couple of years, and said he was out playing with Josh Turner, playing fiddle with Josh Turner at the time, and we talked about it, and we called Daryl and these other guys, and just started another band, just like a bunch of crazy people. But it was good. And it was good, good from the start. This band's been I've made my living just doing this since we started it. So basically, 2019, I quit what I was doing, started booking this band, and of course, you know what happened, March of 2020. Just getting it off the ground good, and then COVID hit. But somehow the Lord's been good. We survived. I've not, I've not lost my house. Everything's been everything's been good. So
So, winning the 1997 Banjo Player of the Year award from the Society for the Preservation of Bluegrass in America must have been a pivotal moment. How did that recognition change your trajectory in the industry?
I don't know that it did. It's Spigma's a good organization. I love going to their show, their award show, and their their event. But I mean, it's a I will say this: that organization is probably a little more reserved organization than maybe the IBMA is. And at that time, I was playing with Quicksilver, so Doyle was the most popular band on that, especially in that circuit there, the Midwest. That's a heavy Midwest. You got Oklahoma, Missouri, Iowa, Western Kentucky. Louisiana, all those states, all the way back into the southeast, that kind of form, what Spigma is. That's kind of where their core work is. So yeah, I won the award probably because of who I was with, for sure, not because I was the best banjo player, but it was a great honor, and I don't know if it changed my career, but it was a great honor and very humbling moment for sure. But I felt like giving it to somebody else because here I am playing with a thumb, just according with a thumb, and there's so many guys that can do so much more than I can. But like I say, it was a great honor, and I'm sure those guys were tickled for me too. So
So, as co founder of Appalachian Roadshow with Daryl Webb, what inspired the two of you to launch this project, and how did you envision blending your styles, your banjo work with his mandolin and tenor vocals?
well, this I think I explained a little bit of that on a couple of questions ago, but this band started when we had Mountain Heart. Jim and myself had talked about a few things that might work. That might could work with what we had, because the musicians we had with Mountain Heart were phenomenal musicians, and they could play every style of music and did play every style of music. On the side they would, some of them have an R&B band, blues band, some of them played country. It had a lot of different stuff, jazz. I mean, all these guys were from different backgrounds. So towards the end there, we were talking about doing something and calling it, maybe the American Music Roadshow or something like that. We were talking about the roadshow thing was something we liked, and this is back before Antique Roadshow and all these other things come about. We were talking about that, and I left 2015. Jimmy left a few weeks after I did, Van Cleve, and we kind of kept that idea under wraps for a while, and then in 20 well in 20 probably 2016 or 17 is when I actually recorded my solo project. Now I did it. Jim was the producer on it, so I recorded a solo project. Then while I was getting ready to start, I was going to try to do a band on that, and I kept thinking, man, I'm from Appalachia. I know I am the heart and soul of everything I do is rooted in Appalachia. And I called Jim. Well, I saw Jim one day. I was driving a bus for Martina McBride, and Jim was at home for a day on the road from working with Josh Turner. So we ate lunch and met and went to the park and took a walk. His little boy was with us, and I said, "What do you think about this?" And I told him I wanted to do something called it Appalachian Roadshow. And he said, "I love it." He said, I played him, songs that I had in mind, things that I had either picked up down through the years with Mountain Heart that we didn't record, or stuff that I felt like would be, standard pieces for this band, and they still are. They were and are. When we cut the first record, I had several things that I'd had in my mind for years. So that when we started talking about it, he said, I could do it, but I'm making really good money with Josh. He said, I mean, I don't think we could just start out. and play and make a living. I said, well, we'll see. And he said, well, just if you can get it off the ground, count me in. So he said, you should call Darrell Webb. He said, I think Darrell his voice would fit perfect. He's from Jolo, West Virginia. He's as neck as you can get, So I called Darrell, and he was very interested in it. So we started talking about who to get in the studio. And I said, well, let's just go cut a record. Let's do these songs, work them up. And I went to Darrell's house, and he and I demoed the record, just me and him. We played the instruments on it. Darrell played most of them, and we demoed the stuff and just sang the parts and kind of got everything ready. And then, of course, we sent it to Jim, and he loved it. Then we started talking to Zeb Snyder about playing guitar here, and that's another story. But anyway, ended up I called Todd Phillips, who's one of the most famous, sought after bass players in the history of our business, and he wasn't working with anybody. And I asked him if he wanted to do a session. And he said, yeah, I'd love to. So we came to do the session. While we were doing it, he said, who are you going to have tour this, playing bass? And I said, well, you if you want to. And I just figured, there's no way Todd Phillips would be playing. Yeah, I'd like to do that. And, he said, what do you pay? And I told him, and he said, yeah, I think I can swing that. So Todd became a member at that time, and Zeb, of course, came in and done the record. And we had Brian Sutton. Before we hired Zeb, we had Brian Sutton hired to play guitar on the session and just do some parts. So Brian came in, and then about the time that we got ready to go to the studio, Zeb come into the band. So it was, it all just worked out fine. And we started touring in February of 2019. And besides the COVID lull that we had, and we still worked some during that, besides the COVID lull, we've worked pretty consistently ever since.
So, with your Grammy nomination under your belt, how do you see the bluegrass genre evolving in 2025, especially with younger audiences discovering it through platforms like social media?
Well, I mean, it's the bluegrass audience is growing. I've seen a rise and a fall at the same time. The old ways, the way the bluegrass festivals were set up, and they still are. A lot of them are, and we still play a lot of them. They've went down. People have died. The people that loved the straight ahead bluegrass bands that were there in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and all that. Those festivals have for sure dropped off and declined in attendance. The audience is older, and for the most part, and there's some new coming in, but probably not a huge influx of fresh, fans coming into that side of it. But then you've got, the deadhead side of it, where Billy Strings and people like that are coming out and they're playing. I mean, Billy's playing bluegrass. He's coming in playing bluegrass music, but he's popular in his look and his style and his personality. It fits that Grateful Dead crowd, Leftover Salmon, Green Sky, that crowd, and he resonated with those guys and plays. He plays Larry Sparks, Ralph Stanley, Flatt and Scruggs. He plays all that stuff, and they've never heard that stuff before. And I'm 56. I'm not cool enough to take it to them. So, but Billy is, and he's a great player and singer. So you've seen a huge rise there. And of course, in 2000, 2001 we had a big increase in the business with the Old Brother, Where Art Thou movie. That soundtrack caught on, and they did a couple of tours on that. And everybody that played bluegrass decent saw an increase. I think during that time, the work went up, the money went up. I think it was maybe a little bit of fool's gold, but it lasted for 4 or 5 years. It lasted for a pretty good while, and then it kind of leveled off and started kind of tailing off again. But yeah, it's a strange industry, and you just have to find your own. And, today more than ever, you find your market. You go and you build your hard ticket, as opposed to just living off the festival circuits. And the early Mountain Heart days, we kind of set a false price and a false standard, to a certain extent. With festivals, because they were so prominent. We started in 99, and an Old Brother come out in like 2000, 2001. And so the industry took off, and we just held on, grabbed the reins and held on as it went up. And so when it come time to have a real hard ticket sale consistently across the country, it was, we had to almost restart and build a hard ticket. This band, we've tried to build it from the start. That's one of the things we learned for sure.
So, if you could collaborate with one artist, past or present, who would it be and why? And how might that influence a future Appalachian Roadshow project?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I got to collaborate with. I don't know. Any one particular. There's several. There's several that I love to. I'm a lot of people I listen to and love what they do. But we just to kind of give you a good answer. We just recently have we tried to do this for 3 or 4 years. We love Daryl Scott. I don't know if you know who Daryl Scott is, but great artist. He wrote many hits, and he's played. He sang for other acts, big acts on the road. But to me, he's one of the greatest artists out there. He's one of the most creative singers and songwriters, players. He never does the same thing twice. And we all just love what he does, but we didn't know him real well. But we ended up getting a show. I've got a good friend in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. We work for Rich Winkleman, and Rich said, "Put me something special together." And we called Daryl Scott's people and talked to them, and then talked to him and his wife Angela, and asked them if they'd be interested in doing a collaboration show with us at Gettysburg. So we actually did this past May. We did a collab with Daryl Scott, and it was incredible. I just he's got so many hit songs and songs that should be hits that maybe aren't in popular music, but they're for sure hits to anybody that listens to music for what they should listen to it for, as opposed to just a popularity contest or the way somebody looks. Daryl's so yeah, that's probably that was one of my goals, was to do a collab or two with him, and hopefully we'll get to do some more.
So, with the PAC 2025 tour lineup, including performances at venues like the Tin Pan in Richmond, what new music or surprises can fans expect from Appalachian Roadshow in the coming year?
Oh, we've got a new record coming out. It's called Della Jane's Heart. It's coming out in on January 23rd of 2026, and the single's already been out for a while, and it's been I hadn't. I don't know if it's been long enough for it to be in the Bluegrass Unlimited charts yet. It's usually they're like 3 months behind. How a magazine runs. But Bluegrass Today is kind of the standard chart right now in bluegrass, and it's been, I think, 7 or 8 times it's reached number one on the Bluegrass Today charts. It's still, last time I looked, it was still fairly high up. And Zeb, our guitar player, just cut a new solo project, and he put a single out right after Della Jane. And one week we were number one on there, and the next week we were number three, and Zeb was number one with his song. So I had to got to Zeb was on a number one and a number three at the same time. So yeah, we've got that. We've got the new record coming out. There'll be some radio and I'm sure some television appearances of some sort. I don't know how big or small, but we usually have a pretty good press plan around a new record when we're on cycle. And then I know next year we're working. Let's see, we're going to, I think it's Gstaad, Switzerland, and doing a
Oh.
couple of dates over there. That's going to be a real cool. They say it's a huge festival, so we're going over there and working next year in September. I think I've got about 50 dates now for next year so far. So we'll end up in the 75 to 85 date range is probably where we'll end up next year, and
So,
it's good.
so if you could give one piece of advice to close out the interview to aspiring banjo players facing their own obstacles, what would it be based on your incredible journey?
Mm, well, I mean, if I was giving advice, I would be one of my biggest pieces of advice, and this was given to me by Sonny Osborne when I first started playing. I played out. I just started with Doyle, and I hadn't been playing too many years when I started with Doyle, and I saw Sonny, and he said, "Son, you're doing good." He said, just remember, always show your strength. Don't show any weaknesses. If you've got a weakness, don't try to do it. Show your strength. Play to your strengths, sing to your strengths. Don't try to be somebody else. So I've always tried to, just do what I can do myself because of my indifference and my situation. I've always tried to do that, and I've always, if anybody's ever asked me that question, that's kind of what I tell them. The advice that Sonny gave me, it stuck with me a long time. And of course, I couldn't do anything else. It's hard. People play and they reach under the banjo and they can move their fingers and use four or five at one time. And me, I have to have an open string or two. And so I play a melody. I try to pick out the melody of the song, and it's a real straight ahead, straightforward, approach to playing the banjo. It's just playing the melody, and so yeah, that would be my advice to somebody is learn what your strengths and weaknesses are. Be able to hear. Can you what how good are you and how good are you not. Have great practice habits. Listen to all kinds of music. It's some people will just play, learn a few tunes, and that's all good. And if you want to do it and try to, take it to the next level, you got to you have to love it. You have to really love it. And I don't think there's anybody out there that loves it more than I do. I love to do it. I'm as happy doing it now as I've ever been in my life. And like I say, I'm 56, and travel's probably harder than it's ever been. And I don't think there's a time I leave or come in that I'm not overjoyed by what I get to do for a living. It's incredible. God has blessed me so much. He's given me a wonderful family. I've got two grown daughters, 24 and 21, and beautiful girls, and one's in college. The other one is working. She went to college for a while and with my older daughter, and she decided to come back here. She's got a good job here where I live in LJ, and then I've got two adopted youngins, and Zoe and Tyler, and they were 4 and 5 when we got them, and they're now 10, and Zoe just turned 12, so Tyler's 10. So I've got those two kids, and my wife Beverly. My mom's still living, so I've been blessed. The little boy that we adopted, he's got a hand, and it looks just like mine. That was the draw. That was the draw when my oldest daughter was working at the daycare center, and she saw this youngin come in there. That they were in placement with somebody from the state, and we'd never thought about adopting or anything like that. And she had told me, I wish we could help these kids. This boy, he don't have a dad, and he's got a hand just like yours. And I dismissed it. I said, well, that's something. Always, no way we could ever do that. And I dismissed all that. And then when it come down to a couple weeks later, I was riding down the road, and God just dealt with me. He just spoke to my heart, and told me he wanted me to go by and see those kids. So I did, and it was immediately I knew that we were going to have to take the kids in. We never fostered or anything, and so that was on a Wednesday. And I won't tell this too long a story, but on Friday, the parents that had them called the daycare and said they're too wild. We can't take them because somebody there take them for the weekend. So my wife called me. She said, "Can we take those kids?" And if you knew how I'd prayed about that, and what I'd said to God, I said, Lord, you can't put this on me. I know I feel what you're doing. You can't put this on me. I'm almost 50 years old, and I can't take on kids. We make our bills, but it's just barely. I couldn't take on two more mouths to feed and all that, and the burden just got heavier and heavier. And I said, well, I didn't, not really trying to barter with God, but I said, I don't know what to do. If this is something you want, what I'm feeling is right. I'm gonna sit back. I'm not gonna go back. I'm gonna sit back and watch you work. And if you make it happen, I'll be obedient. And that was on Wednesday afternoon. I was headed to Nashville, and I went and seen them before I headed out to go meet the guys to play. And on Friday, the parents said they couldn't handle them. Sent them back told somebody from the daycare to take them home. So they took them home, or they called my wife and said, is it okay if we send those kids home with y'all that Barry come by and seen? And she said, well, I don't know. Let me call him. So when she called, I said, well, does Chastity think y'all can handle them? Because I was on the road. And she said, yeah. She said, thanks, we can handle them. So they come home with my daughter. Man, my wife and my daughters kept them for the weekend. I got back. This was Father's Day weekend of 2019, I think it was. And anyway, we come home. I got home on Saturday night. Sunday was Father's Day. We got up, went to church, and I had prayed about that, and I called it a burden. And we went to church at a place that we don't go all the time. It's just we were visiting, and I know the pastor well, but he didn't know we had kids that we had any thought about that with. But he was preaching on Joshua and them marching around the walls of Jericho, and he got about 3 rounds around the walls of Jericho, and he just stopped in the middle of what he's preaching. And it's just like God had to slap me in the face, just say it right to me. He said, the Lord just dealt with me to say this, and I've got to say it, and it's completely off subject. He said, this ain't got nothing to do with Joshua. He said, but if you've got a burden and you call it a burden, and he said, and God give it to you, it's not a burden. You do what God said to do, and with joy. And he said, just do it, and he'll take care of the rest. And that's what he said. And I told him not one soul. I hadn't told my wife or anything about my prayers or anything. So that was on Sunday. My wife said, what are we going to do with them Monday? I said, take them back and drop them off at the daycare. And I said, I just want to see how this works. I want to watch it work. I said, I'm not going to jump into nothing both feet like that, but I knew what was going to happen. Took them back Monday. And Monday afternoon, the state called called the daycare center and said, we're going to take these kids and take them to a group home. They've been in we were the 9th placement in 10 months. They've been in 9 different placements when they ended up getting placed with us. And she said, they said that told the daycare they were going to take them and put them in a group home and separate them because nobody wouldn't take them together, and they were going to try to separate them. And that's all each other's all they'd ever had. They'd been taken away from the parents since the little boy was 3, and the little girl was 4, I think, at the time, or almost 5. Anyway, they said, "Would y'all want to take them?" And I said, "Can we?" And they said, "Well, let's call." And we got on some calls and called around with the state. And they said, "Well, since your daughter works with them, y'all could foster them if you can get your impact classes done." So we went to impact classes and to become foster parents. And we took the kids in that Monday evening, and they had never left since. They've not spent a night away from us since. So we adopted them in 2020, a little less than a year later. And we never had we done our impact classes in 3 weeks, drove an hour one way and back 3 days a week, and got our classes done. And the state never came and finished the home study, and we were almost a year in. And I finally just called one day. I called them. I said, "Hey, look, are y'all going to do this home study?" "Well, yeah, we're just dragging behind a little bit." And I said, "Well, we can't turn these kids out. Can we just adopt them?" And they said, "Yeah, you can if you want to." And I said, "All right." So we got on. It ended up being COVID time. We did a Skype call with the judge and adopted the kids. I think it was April the 20th of 2020. So we've had them ever since. So yeah, I've been a blessed man, and got a great life, and I wouldn't have it any other way. It's if I have to leave here tomorrow, I couldn't complain about what kind of opportunity I've had here. God's been so good to me.
Well, Barry, thank you so much for your time. I encourage people they can go to your website, theappalachianroadshow.com, to check out your music and your tour
Absolutely.
schedule. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate you getting with me.
All right. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye bye.